Me. Welcome to the Fantastic Comic Fan Show. With us here today is David Wohl, Editor-in-Chief of Zenescope Entertainment. David,
Hello.
thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's great to get a chance to talk some fantastic comic books. So, as a first-time guest, I want to get to know your origin story. What got you into comics and what made you a fan?
I wasn't really a fan like when I was a kid. I was a fan a little bit. My dad would get me some comics when I was sick, and I remember reading like Luke Cage maybe or something, fighting an alligator and Daredevil and some stuff. But when I was in high school, I had this friend named Mark Siri who gave me just like a whole bunch of comics like that he had. It was John Byrne, Captain America, and Fantastic Four, and X-Men, the Death of Jean Grey, and some books like that. And then when I was a senior in high school, we had this opportunity to become interns at Marvel, my friends and I, because my school had some kind of connection to them. So I ended up becoming an intern there when I was a senior in high school. So that's where it started. And then once I was there, I really enjoyed it. I really started liking it a lot. So I started picking up the books and taking more jobs there, like as they came up. So I went up through the ranks there.
Wow, that's amazing. I definitely want to get into that a bit more. But before
Okay.
that, do you want to tell the fans a little bit about yourself, who you are, what comics you're working on, anything you feel like sharing, really?
Okay, so I grew up in New York City. That's where
Mhm.
I ended up in going to Marvel Comics. So wait, what do I work on? I'm the editor-in-chief at Zenescope. I'm writing a Van Helsing book. I wrote three different Oz series over the past few years. I'm working on King Dracula right now that's coming out currently. And basically part of the creative team at Zenescope, working with Joe Brusha to create the storylines for the Zenescope books and overseeing all the comic books that we put out as an editor.
That's amazing. Just to move right on into Marvel, how did that happen? Was it just Marvel offered sort of an internship at your high school?
Yeah, my high school, when we were seniors, had these various, they called it the intercollegiate year. Like when you finished all your senior stuff, when you finished all your requirements to graduate, it was like the beginning of senior year. So you had this opportunity to do other things. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. They had a whole bunch of different ones. In New York, there's a free newspaper called The Village Voice that I could have gotten an internship at, or some other free newspaper in New York. And Marvel were the three that they presented to me. I was working at Baskin Robbins at the time, my local Baskin Robbins, and I was an assistant manager there. And I was hoping that I could parlay my Baskin Robbins work to become my senior year project, but they wouldn't let me. Probably better for me that they didn't let me. So then my friends were going to Marvel, so I figured I would go along with them. So when we were interns at Marvel, we would just make copies and get to know people, and people would just have a big bin of stuff that they wanted interns to do, and you would just take things and get to know everybody there. It was mostly making copies. And actually it had nothing to do with being a lawyer. We had to get indicias signed by the legal department. That was about the only interaction we had with the legal department. But then also we would go on errands for them if they wanted us to pick up coffee or whatever. We would go like when there were big meetings going on with different creative people. We would get to meet like a whole bunch of creative people because the bullpen there, the interns were in the bullpen along with all the artists and stuff. So whenever anyone came in, like Chris Claremont or Walt Simonson, I know those were among the first people that I met when I was there. You would just get to see them and talk to them. And then I worked for Peter David for a little while because he was like the direct sales. At that point, he was doing sales for Marvel. So I got to learn that side of it a little bit. And then I just kept going up there. After I graduated college, I went to school in Manhattan, like nearby. So I worked full time and went to school full time. And I started working on Marvel Universe. And that's actually where my love of comics came from, was working on Marvel Universe and reading all the books because my job was to find action shots for Mark Grunwald. I would have to read like tons of comics just to find action shots of the characters using their powers and stuff.
That sounds like a really fun job.
It was.
Yeah, I'd love to know, when did you actually get to start writing comics for Marvel?
What I worked on this new universe books that came out, and we had backup stories in those. And my boss Howard Mackey asked me if I wanted to write, and I ended up writing some of those new universe backup stories.
Oh, that's cool. I've probably read a couple of those then. I like the old New Universe stuff. I track it down whenever I can.
I wrote something in Justice 25. maybe a Night Mask story. And then also we had this Iron Man annual that we had a lot of pinups, and we wanted to use a story where we could use up the pinups that we hadn't actually used before. So I wrote a story around the pinups.
That's
And then
really
Mark
cool.
Grunwald, and then Mark Grunwald asked me, they had this one year where in all the annuals they introduced like a whole bunch of different characters. And Mark Grunwald did a Captain America battling Bantam story. And he asked me because he knew I knew boxing, and the Bantam was supposed to be like a boxing kind of character. So he asked me to co-write it with him. So that was really my first actual story. Was probably working on that with Mark Grunwald.
My next question was, what was your first published story? So this is perfect.
The New Universe stuff probably came first, and then the Iron Man annual story, and then the Battling Bantam. Because that was probably like, I don't know, early 90s, 92. I'm not sure. Sometime around then.
Oh, that's really cool. Now, it may be hard to pick, but do you think you could name your favorite single issue you've written?
Yeah, that was probably Wolverine Witchblade when I went to Top Cow and then did, because Mark was the editor in chief at Marvel, and I asked if we could do this big crossover, and we did this big crossover called Devil's Reign, and that was one of the stories in it, which I really liked. So I always think of that as my favorite.
It's a crossover for the ages, right?
It was very fun.
You later left Marvel to become the editor-in-chief and then the executive vice president of Top Cow, eventually becoming the president. How did you get that job, and what was it like working for Top Cow and sort of Image in the 90s? Like that must have been just something else.
Yeah, it was cool. Basically, around that time, some people who worked at Marvel ended up working for Image. Like there was a letterer, Michael Heisler ended up becoming the letterer of. It was when Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee had their studio together, Homage, or no, yeah, Homage was the name of the studio. And so Mike Heisler recommended me to Mark to become his. Back then, it was just his editor. And Mark and I had worked together a little bit because I did a bunch of trading card sets, the Jim Lee X-Men trading cards. I worked with Jim, and we did this. I think it was Marvel, the third set of trading cards where I worked with a whole bunch of different, and they were artists like as they were going to Image. So Mark and I worked
Right.
together on those, a set of those. And so he called me, and I came to visit, and it seemed like a cool place to work. Yeah, I left and joined Image. At that point, Top Cow was basically, I don't know, like a handful of people. Cow itself was maybe like 4 or 5 people. And then we shared an office with Jim Lee's studio. So we all worked together working on Cyberforce mostly and some other. And then we started launching new projects as we were there. Back then, it was so small, and but the books were selling so well. So it was just like a very fun place to work.
Yeah,
And
on the subject of those,
it was always fun. It changed over the years, but it was a great experience.
awesome. On the subject of those new series that you launched, you were an integral part of several of Top Cow's biggest series, co-creating both Witchblade and The Darkness. What was it like being a creative on the ground floor of characters and series that are now just such established properties?
Oh, it's great. You never know when you're doing it, like where it's going to go. But like I said, at that point, like we were such a small company and we were putting out books like just a little at a time. So we had a lot of time to just come up with new stuff to incubate. For The Darkness, I remember Mark and I just, it was actually, we came up with it like a couple of years before it became a story, before we brought it to Garth Ennis to become the story that it became. And but we would just sit by his pool in San Diego and just come up with ideas and be like, what sounds cool? He'd have ideas for things that he wanted to do, and I would just riff off of his ideas, and they would just happen. And then after a year in San Diego, we moved up to Los Angeles. Witchblade was the same thing. Like Brian Haberlin, co-creator, and I basically just sat over a lunch in Santa Monica, like coming up with the basic ideas for what Witchblade was going to become. And then we brought in Mark and Mike Turner, who was going to become the artist, and we all just sat around and came up with what the concept was going to be. It was a different time, and it was just really fun. Like just whatever would come up with became, and then it all just developed because Top Cow had all these amazing artists there. And they would all sort of chip in, like Joe Benitez would be like, "What about this?" And people would just come up with different ideas for it that all just became part of the main concept.
Just on that subject, when did you guys know you had a hit on your hands with the title? Like at what point did you know, oh, this is going to turn into something big?
Around the time it came out, it was because Wizard picked it up and people just started talking about it a lot. I think before the first issue came out, we really had no idea, but then the sales were really good on it, and we were just getting a lot of calls about it. And I think actually, right around the time we launched the book, Michael Turner and I went to this convention. It was like one of the first MegaCons in Orlando. And no, it was in Tampa. It was by the guy who created MegaCon, but it was like this Tampa convention. And Mike just had these huge lines. People were like, ah, it's okay. But for the most part, it was like lines out the door for Michael Turner to sign these Witchblade number ones. And I feel like that was really the first indication that we already knew the sales were good, but the sales were on par at the beginning, on par with other books that we were launching. But it seemed to hit differently, and people just seemed to really enjoy it.
Just one more on Witchblade, and then we'll move to
Oh,
more
sure. I
current
mean,
things. Did you have any ideas for Witchblade that never saw the light of day? Did you have an idea for a story in those initial issues, or an idea for the character or concept itself that just was left on the cutting room floor?
yeah, I'm sure we did. Part of it, since because also there was a co-writer that I brought in, Christina Z, who that was while we were writing the first issue. I think she started with me, and then she had her ideas, and I had my ideas, and we tried to blend it together. And
Mhm.
then Mike had his ideas, and yeah, there were definitely some. It was mostly because we created this sort of mythology that the Witchblade existed all through time, and all these famous historical figures may have had it. You don't know it, like Joan of Arc had it, but people didn't know that's what it was. So I think there was a lot of what became Tales of the Witchblade stories that I think would have been cool that didn't happen. Like we were supposed to have like a whole bunch of art in Irons is like the bad guy,
Mhm.
and in his room he was supposed to have all this art of various Witchblade related incidents throughout time. So a lot of those I wanted to cover more, like in flashbacks and stuff during the first story. We didn't really have a chance to do that, but it would have been cool.
That's really cool. That does sound like it would have been a lot of fun. But pivoting to your more current, you're the editor-in-chief of the incomparable Zenescope Entertainment. How did you get that job? And can you tell us what kind of duties an editor-in-chief has? You've already talked about it a little bit.
I knew those guys. I knew the Zenescope guys, Joe and Ralph, for a
Mhm.
while since Zenescope started pretty early on. I wrote a an issue of Seven. Was probably the first thing I did for Zenescope when we did the Seven movie adaptation. I wrote one
The
of the
Brad Pitt
stories in it.
one?
I'm sorry.
The Brad Pitt one?
Yeah,
Wow, that's awesome.
yeah, it was like in the mid 2000s, and I would see them a lot of conventions, and then when the editor in chief position came up about 5 years ago, yeah, I guess it's 5 years ago at this point. I reached out to them because it seemed like it would be a cool place to work, and it all worked out, and they knew me already, and I know they like my writing. I'd also done this Van Helsing 10-year issue, this sort of like time travel story.
Oh, no worries. I've actually had my Wi-Fi go out mid-Zoom call before, so you are all good.
So yeah, so I knew they were looking for somebody. It was in COVID time because I live in California. They're all based in Pennsylvania, but as this whole remote world became more of a thing, I think they were comfortable with working with me from afar. For the first few years, Dave Franchini, who was also the editor in chief and publisher, he and I would work together. The cool thing about working at Zenescope is we have this universe that is self-contained, right? We're
Mhm.
not like we don't have a whole bunch of other characters running through it. So we could look at, oh, this is where we want the character to be now, and this is where we want the character to be a year from now, and kind of all build on that through the different books. So Dave and I would work together doing that, and now Joe and I work together doing that. Actually, I guess back then it was the three of us. Dave and I were more on a day-to-day thing, and then he left about a year ago to pursue his own publishing career that I follow and try to help him when I can, and he still tries to help me when he can. And Joe and I work together for the doing the same thing. Like basically, Joe has a lot of ideas. It's his company. It's what he wants.
Mhm.
He's had a lot of ideas for the different characters and where he wants them to go. And my job is to help him get his characters to where he wants to go for the stories he writes. And he helps me do that with the stories that I'm writing and what I want to do. So it's like a fun experience because we come up with the outlines. And even when we work with other writers, we're coming up with the outlines to help them write the stories. So we know where things are going and how to set it up to get there.
That that sounds so interesting. And I have more questions about the Zenoscope collaborative process a little farther down, but on top of all those tasks that you handle,
Oh yeah,
you
that's right. I'm
also
sorry. I didn't fully answer your question.
no, it was a
So
fantastic answer.
But besides that, I hire the artists, work with them on getting the books out. Any writers that are outside of the two of us, I'll work with to get them to write the stories and edit the stories and track all the artists to make sure they're on time. And then also the other part of my job is working on the collectible covers and all those
Mhm.
artists to do the collectible covers and trying to keep those on schedule and of the quality that people expect from Zenescope.
That- That's amazing. On top of all of those duties, you also do write a lot of comics for Zenescope. Do you want to talk about some of your favorites from over the past 5 years, or talk about what you're working on in the future, or what you've been working on recently?
My favorites, I would say, is I wrote this Oz Return of the Wicked Witch story. I thought was
Mhm.
really good. I wrote some Wonderland stories, these like battles for Wonderland stories that came out over the past few years that I really liked. And I was writing the ongoing, it wasn't really an ongoing series, but it was an ongoing collection of Gretel stories that were all one long story, starting with Bloody Mary, where she was like hunting for witches. And I really enjoyed working on that too. And King Dracula is what I'm working on right now. Hopefully people like it.
I
And
do.
that King Dracula story, thank you. That King Dracula story leads to we're going to be doing a Van Helsing story that takes place in Victorian times, and that's what I'm in the process of getting going on right now.
That sounds awesome. It actually leads into my next question. For the King Dracula miniseries, which issue 4 will be out in April, you've reimagined Dracula, making him more sort of an underdog fighting against the vampire lords who want to raise the red god Vero Callis. I hope I'm getting that right.
I don't even know. I think there's another "la" in there,
Ah,
Virolacoloculus or something. I don't know.
my, my
You probably
apologies.
did it better. You probably did it better than me. No, that's fine.
I do my best. With Dracula being adapted into comics many times previously, how did you try to make this interpretation, Xenoscope's Dracula, stand out?
I think Pat Chand, who did the original Dracula stories for us, definitely laid the groundwork. Pat and Dave too, and Joe. So I felt like I had a lot to work with already with our version of Dracula. I
Mhm.
think that making him the anti-hero of the story is a challenge, but it was like a fun challenge. Like over the course of the King Dracula story, we've established in Zenescope that he's got a daughter, Charlotte, and he has this relationship with Van Helsing where she thought she killed him at some point, but he ended up going to hell and becoming like a king, which is was a story that Dave and I wrote with Pat. So we're bringing all these characters into this story and trying to show how, because this red god is coming around, because these vampire lords, and again, like I said before, I don't want to take credit for things too, because Joe Brusha had a lot to do with the creation of the King Dracula story, and I'm working with him to build it. So I try not to take credit for things that aren't totally mine. But so we're creating this Dracula as an anti-hero, and Van Helsing and Charlotte, who hate Dracula, realize that he's the lesser of two evils when it comes to this red god. Anyway, but he's a bad guy. He's the worst guy, the Dracula. So by the time we get to issue 4, I think they're realizing that they need to save him because he's the only hope against this greater threat. And then out of the story, we're going to create this whole new status quo for Dracula and for Van Helsing's relationship with him that'll lead into the future.
And that's because Van Helsing Throne of Blood, the graphic novel, led directly into this miniseries, correct?
Yes. Yeah, basically Throne of Blood was the launch point where we learn the world that these vampire lords have basically taken Dracula hostage and are trying to use his blood to as a sacrifice to bring back this god, and Van Helsing ends up helping him get out of it.
Right.
Oh, spoiler alert.
It's
Go ahead.
also part of the ongoing Blood and Shadow arc from Zenescope, where every story counts, every monster matters, and no one is safe.
Yeah, try it. Not even me.
Yikes. So Van Helsing Throne of Blood was part 1 of this, and King Dracula follows it up. What can you tell fans of Blood and Shadow? Like, what's next?
Oh, so basically,
Yes.
Blood and Shadow comes out of the last year's the Father Time storyline, the End of Time storyline. And so basically all the characters of the Grimm Fairy Tales universe have to fight Father Time, who is able to bring people back from the dead and do all these crazy things. And in the end, he destroys all these worlds that were part of Zenescope, like the world of Oz and the world of Wonderland and Mist and Neverland. And he creates this new world order, which is the Blood and Shadows New World Order.
Mhm.
That Harris has this book, the Book of Shadows, the Tome of Blood and Shadow. I always say shadows, but it's shadow, just no S. And it's just a darker time. Like he's basically brought all this darkness to our world. And that's really what the Blood and Shadow is. All these creatures that we've never seen before, like the Hollowborn, and there's new types of werewolves that are more dangerous, and it's just a more dangerous time for the characters. And the King Dracula and Van Helsing book and the Karis Blood and Shadow book and the Robin Hood Shadow Target book all introduce us to this new world that's more dangerous for our heroes and for humanity. And they have to figure out a new way to fight it.
That sounds amazing. I just finished reading Robin Hood Shadow Target last week, and I absolutely loved it. I love that we're getting more of the characters Terror and Fury and Killer Cobra.
Yeah, so Robin Hood ends up in this connected to this organization, Shade, and who's very involved in this stuff.
Mhm.
And Killer Cobra is part of it, and the Man Goat and the Bunny Man are part of it, and Vesper is part of it.
Yes, that's amazing. So one of the things I love most about a Zenescope is how you manage to produce well-crafted, imaginative stories continually. Like I've said, my favorites are Terror and Fury, Van Helsing, Robin Hood, and my favorite might have to be Pooh versus Bambi. Uh,
Yeah, I like Pooh versus Bambi a lot too.
it's just so fun. I don't know how you guys did that, but it's mind-blowing. So how does the Zenescope team work together to produce so many like stellar stories that also have all these just unique takes to them? I never would have imagined something like Pooh versus Bambi could exist.
Pooh Bambi, a lot of credit goes to Noah Mitchell too, because he was the writer of that, and he co-wrote it with Dave Franchini and I. Yeah. And yeah, I think that was another one. I think Joe originally came to us wanting to do something with that, and yeah, we just tried to. I think we try to not make anything too unserious. We try to. I know that's something that I've tried to do in all the projects that I've worked on is I want them to take themselves seriously, even if something is really offbeat, like Pooh Bambi or like Man Goat and Bunny Man, which is Joe's. I want them to take themselves seriously. I feel like that's important. Like when you read something, if it's so unserious, then it's hard to get into it. And that's what I think Pooh Bambi worked because Noah was really good at doing that. Like we tried to keep the characters relatable, even though they're Pooh, Bambi, and Rabbit, and Eeyore, and all the characters.
That's amazing. Thank you. Sorry, just making sure. Yeah, that's just Pooh versus Bambi. That's a series that knocked my socks off. I remember I went past the Zenescope booth at San Diego Comic-Con and I got another series, and then I had to come back the next day because I couldn't get Pooh versus Bambi out of my head.
I'm glad.
It was just really terrific. But as we slowly move into wrapping up here, what comics are you reading that others are not and should be?
I don't know if I'm reading anything that others are not. I'm not reading too many comics at the moment, but I'm really into. Actually, Noah got me into some Absolute stuff. So I've been reading Absolute Manhunter, Absolute Batman, and I'm trying to follow more of the Absolute stuff because I think it's really good. Also, I was looking at some bad idea books that I think are really good. Ordained, I thought was cool. I know I need to read more comics. I just don't have much of a chance.
No, I
What
mean,
do you like?
sorry?
What do you like?
Oh, I'm gonna sound like a bit of a parrot here. I am addicted to the Absolute Universe. Absolute Batman is just so good. I'm loving it. And Absolute Superman, the latest issue has him teaming up with Hawkman to fight Parasite. It's amazing.
I'll have to check it out.
And I read a couple other indie books,
Like
like,
what?
sorry?
Oh, like what? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm associate editor for independent publisher G-Man Comics, so I've just with their most recent Kickstarter, just finishing up in the past couple of weeks. I've been proofing all the issues before they go to print, so I've really been just reading, well, comics for the people I work for. But actually, right here, this is my next big read. I've got the JSA Omnibus by Jeff Johns.
Oh, cool.
I've heard it's an amazing series, and I was able to pick it up for about $10. I want to see what all the hype is about.
That sounds good. I want
Real
to try that too.
is mind blowing. Absolute Martian Manhunter is crazy good.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah, but sorry, I know we already talked about this a little bit, but are there any upcoming projects you want to talk about or promote, get the word out?
I think the Van Helsing one I'm really excited about, and that's going to be coming out in May, I believe. We have a Kickstarter for it. I'm trying to think what else. And there's some more Robin Hood. Joe basically in the latest Myths and Monsters series that's coming out soon in a couple of weeks. Joe created this new villainous character, our take on the Sandman. That's not like anything like the other Sandmans that are out there. And he's a really cool villain. I'm really excited about it. And the next Robin Hood story will have him in it, and I think it's going to be really cool. I look forward to that too, and I hope people can check it out.
I'll definitely check it out. I'll keep my eyes peeled. Where do you see yourself in the next few years? What's next for Zenescope and what's next for David Wohl?
I think that it's been a strange time because once Diamond distributor fell apart last year, we've been trying to get a more regular connection to retailers and to get our distribution up again. And I feel like we're in the process of getting that solved right now. And once we do, that'll allow us to put more books out again. And I'm actually excited for that because we just have so many stories that we want to tell that we haven't been able to because we cut back over the past year. Characters that I definitely really want to work with again, like Gretel and Oz stories with Dorothy. They're just like my favorites, and I'm hoping that they'll be able to come out soon enough. I think we have an Oz story coming out later this year, but just in general, it's an exciting time because once the retailers are picking up our books again regularly, then we could expand to the way we were when I first started, which is exciting.
I really hope that it works out and that all comes to pass. And just as we slowly start to close out here, if someone's never heard of Zenescope, what book would you recommend? Like their first Zenescope book?
I'd say Grimm Fairy Tales.
Awesome.
The new Grimm Fairy Tales Volume 3 just started at the beginning of this year. And it's tells the Blood and Shadow storyline to the Grimm Fairy Tales characters, and it's been really good so far, with really good art by Al Barrio Nuevo, and I think people should really check it out.
Grim Fairy Tales. And just as we close out here, you get the last word. Any closing comments?
Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to seeing more of your work.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, David Wohl of Zenescope Entertainment, for taking the time to be on the podcast. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.